Good afternoon, everyone. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Georgina Worrell. I'm the head of Powerful Women, and I'm delighted that you can join us this afternoon for the second of our Spotlight webinars. The chair of our webinar today is Nick Wayth, and so I will pass over to him.
Thank you so much, Georgina, and a very good afternoon to everyone. It's great to have you with us today. My name is Nick Wayth. I'm the Chief Executive of the Engie Institute. For those of you who don't know, the Engie Institute, we're the chartered professional body for people in energy. So if you're not a member, please become a member. If your company is a member, you can join as an associate for free. Slight plug there. And I'm also very proud that the Engie Institute is the home of Powerful Women. And has been for the last decade. And I sit on the board of Powerful Women and am a member of the Energy Leaders Coalition, which comprises 16 of the largest UK energy companies, 2 regulators, Ofgem and the North Sea Transition Authority, and the Engie Institute. And this is part of a series of Powerful Women Spotlight webinars that we're doing, the second in the series. We are recording, so hopefully you can spread the word and watch this again later on. So it's a real pleasure to welcome one of the CEOs from the Energy Leaders Coalition. We're delighted to have Miya Paolucci, who's the UK country head for Engie, as well as the UK MD for Energy Management. A very warm welcome. Good afternoon, Miya. How are you?
Yes, good. Thank you, Nick, for hosting me. It's a delight to be here.
Well, thank you so much for your time. So, Miya, I mean, for those of our audience who maybe don't know you so well, perhaps you could give us a brief overview of who you are and your career to date.
Yes. So let me start maybe then by the personal side. My mom is Japanese and my dad is French. And I'm married to an Italian. And as you will see through my career as well, I've lived in a number of countries. So I'll start by saying that I love all kinds of foods, really. But most importantly, I'm personally convinced that it's really a richness to be able to be confronted to many cultures. So diversity is a topic that is close to my heart. And in terms of my career, same way, pretty much. I had a lot of different experience, and I've started my career in strategy consultancy. I then moved to the tourism industry, not quite so common. And I moved then to Engie in France, where I held responsibilities in the retail part of the business initially, then different corporate projects. And then I moved to Romania to take charge of portfolio management, energy sourcing type of activities. And then to London in 2019. And I've been heading portfolio management, energy management activities since. And you had it in the intro. So since December, I'm the CEO of Engie in the UK. And more recently, even since the 1st of March, I've been appointed to the executive committee of our entity that is called Global Energy Management and Sales. So in this part of my scope, I supervise activities throughout Europe, actually.
Fabulous, and congratulations on your recent expansions of your role. That's wonderful. I may come back to which is your favorite cuisine, which is a dangerous question between France, Italy, and Japan, because they are all leading cuisines. But today's focus is really about how we engage the majority while spotlighting the minority. So tell me, what does DEI mean for you, Miya?
Yeah, I mean, good question. And back to basics, I guess. For me, so DEI stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And for me, each of the letter actually matters. So D, like diversity, is this ability to assemble teams with various backgrounds, social-economic backgrounds, gender. And I think it's really a recognition that an individual is not just shaped by its academic background or its expertise, but by everything they live through. And that various ways of thinking are essential to build strong teams. So that's the D. And then the E, equity. So equity is maybe you would say the most natural thing, or most people would say, well, yeah, it's the right and just thing to do to treat everyone equal. And despite that, you would see that it has to be an active engagement. And I would just give one example. If I would say, look, I have a man and a woman, and both work in the same type of job, and with the same level of performance. So, do you believe it's fair that they pay the same way? I'm sure most people would say yes. But companies, when they start to put data behind and measure, they realize that often it's not the case for many different reasons that we can also discuss in the call after. So it has to be an active engagement policy. And then the I, inclusion, I think is really the key to everything, because you can recruit the most brilliant, diverse team and talents. If you don't know how to have them contribute to the team and recognize their value, first, they won't stay, they will feel undervalued and leave. But also, you will not manage to have that kind of diversity of thinking that brings us to the best position to solve complex issues. And just about that, and Nick, I'm sure you will agree, the energy transition is a daunting task. It's probably one of the greatest challenge of all times. It's a many faceted problem with scientific issues, climate issues, technological challenges, social acceptance challenges, again, geopolitical, affordability, you name it. And if you don't have enough different points of view on all those problems and include them, I don't know how we can get through that challenge. So really, for me, DEI becomes a business imperative as much as, a right and just societal change that needs to happen.
And I mean, so you come from quite a diverse family. You work for a global organization. I mean, how does it feel to you when DEI is done well? How does that feel different to when it's not done so well?
Yes, I mean, and this is for me the difference between, putting it as words and saying it and actually embodying it and applying it in actions. And you will find that many people would say, oh yeah, I'm pro DEI. But then, what you actually do about it. And I think that's where the question lies. And it's a question for all of us leaders today. And yeah, I mean, we can speak a little bit more, but like in Engie, there are really concrete actions, programs that are taking place. Our global CEO, Catherine McGregor, is a strong advocate of DEI. You had the chance, I think, to interview her recently. So there's really this willingness to bring actions where our words are.
Sure. And that all resonates strongly. And today the theme is about engaging the majority. And I'm conscious when we have events like this, we are engaging with people who are largely already engaged. We're preaching to the converted. So why is it so important that we do engage the majority? We engage all the men on this agenda, and we really get them into this discussion.
Yes, I think that's exactly the risk we run into when we speak about DEI. It's easy to attract to webcasts like that or different events, people that are converted and are kind of, DEI believers. But you don't want really to remain in that circle of DEI believers because while you're doing that, actually what you create is more division. You can create, and there are voices that oppose or that are, hurt by DEI. And I think it's important we hear them as well because, inclusion is the contrary of division. So it's almost paradoxical that we run into that situation. So we need to be able to hear all the voices, adjust and take into account. And that's the only way to me to lead a profound change.
And Miya, you've worked in different countries. Engie is a global organization. Can you talk about the sort of factors in terms of engaging the DEI workforce around the world and how there are differences and what lessons we can perhaps learn from the UK, from elsewhere to the UK and vice versa?
Yes, so I think what you're raising is an important point. It's the fact that every country, I've experienced that, comes with a different history, different culture. So you can't just have one model fits all. That doesn't work. But what you need, I think in Engie we have, global policy, as I said, strong advocates, leaders, we have programs and so on. So you need that kind of strong global voice and steer, but then you need some latitude given to local management to adjust and adapt when it comes to implementing, because you need to take into account those different realities you have on the ground. And yeah, I mean, you have lessons to take from many countries. Also in preparation of this webcast, I had calls with some of my brilliant CEO colleagues from Mexico, Italy, Chile, and I spent also 5 years in Romania. So I can say every country is a bit different. But, would you know that Romania is the sole country in Europe within Engie that is already at our 2030 targets of parity, gender parity. And it's maybe far from the image some people will have. So it's a country where women have very important positions in society, actually. A very, very interesting country. And I was discussing with my colleague from Mexico, where you would think it's a more male-dominated type of culture, which is certainly true. But she was kind of making the point that even so, large companies have a duty and a possibility to make an impact and change things. And she was making the case of, her speaking at a large conference for students. And a young girl raised her hand and said, look, that's fascinating. They are very interesting careers, but how can I convince my dad that going to study STEM is also something for a girl? So just by speaking about topics, sometimes you raise awareness and you prompt the discussion.
That's really interesting, and I think, I mean, this is anecdotal, but one of the things I picked up is when I've met many of the senior females in the energy industry. Actually, it's been some, I'm sure not in every instance, but it's been the dad who has inspired or encouraged the female to get into STEM, to break the traditions. We had Dr. Nawal Al-Husseini, who was our President's Award winner at our big event in February, and she made that exact point, that her dad said, just go for it, don't be held back. So that's a really interesting observation. And Miya, where would you say, where is the UK leading? What are the good things you picked up in the UK?
Yeah, so I still have, I guess, a slightly kind of a outsider view on the UK, which is interesting. I'm inside, but still not completely inside. I think it's a country where, DI is quite high on the agenda. Generally, it's a topic that's been spoken about, and most, especially large company, would have that in mind. I think generally in the public as well, there's a bit of a pressure put on companies and generally a political world as well to act on it. So I'd say pretty advanced. And we had Denise Wilson, I think, the CEO of the FTSE female leader, yes, recently in a discussion, and I thought that was very, very interesting. She was saying that from 2011, where the representation of female in FTSE companies board was 12.5%, they now reached a figure of 42%, which is pretty much parity when you are above 40%. So in a little over a decade, and that was because of very, very proactive actions, as she was saying. So I think it's a good example, but she was also illustrating the paradox. And in the energy world, we know it. Energy companies in the UK are still far from parity. I think in exec roles, it's probably 15% of the leaders are female only. Yes. And yeah, and she was saying that even in FTSE 100 companies, only 10% of the CEO role was held by a woman. So it tells a lot on the difficulty still for women to access the top role.
It does, and I think, I mean, we should celebrate the progress, but also be realistic and determined to close the gap. And you're right that the energy industry is lagging the sort of UK FTSE more generally, and that's something we've tracked at Powerful Women over the last year, and we'll be reporting our latest data in May. So lots more to be done on that. So looking forward, with a future workforce tackling, as you described, sort of, one of the biggest challenges humanity has ever faced around reaching net zero and the energy transition. What skills does a leader need today to sort of engage with the workforce, to engage the majority, to engage the minority, and attract the right kind of skills to the energy sector, which we know is going to need, maybe double the number of people we have today?
Yes, I mean, being a leader is not easy. It's never been, but it's a complex and ever-evolving task. What we are asked as leader is changing, and will keep on changing. I think young generation is, and I don't want to be too caricatural, because again, everyone is different, and I don't think you can put people in boxes. But what I've experienced is the younger generation is much more demanding, again, in terms of what are you doing actually in terms of actions when it comes to higher values like energy transition, like gender parity, diversity in general. What are you doing? And not just, speak about it, but do something. The other thing is that younger generation put us under pressure in terms of getting them more freedom, evolving faster in an organization, being able to take a role A and then Z and then back to B. So much less linear careers than maybe it was the case in the past. So they're asking that we treat them in their singularity and give them the space to express themselves at the best of their potential. And that's really challenging us as leaders in terms of how we respond to that, what program, what means we put in place to enable that.
And I mean, from my perspective, the energy sector has it's not got a great sort of reputation. Of course, it's a very vast and complex industry, but we've not done a great job really selling the importance, the excitement, and how much this industry matters to society and the planet. We did a really impactful campaign last year around attracting young females into apprentices. So I know a lot of work's been going there in that area. But any more thoughts on what we need to do to actually make this industry more exciting, more sort of purposeful for that generation and for females?
Yes. I mean, it's you preach again, converted. That's absolutely the greatest industry ever. I mean, if you are a bit curious intellectually, where a lot of people are, it's a field of activity where you can completely express yourself from really, again, the technological challenges we're exposed into. You have also in this industry very large operations. So if you like to have your hands really on it and then later, manage very operational things, you have roles like that. You have all those geopolitical issues. So if you're concerned about the world and the big equilibrium in the world, that energy is at the heart of it. And then if you're like a tech person and engage into AI, also AI is going to completely transform our industry. And I can tell you when we deal with portfolio optimization, trading, I mean, the whole world is changing, but not only, I mean, it's going to transform all of our jobs. So it's an industry where there's really what it takes for everyone. And also I want to make a point that I haven't mentioned. I'm not from a STEM background. I've studied business. So it's of course important that we have more people and female going into STEM, but you can also join the industry from another angle as well and make a career.
Absolutely, and we need every skill set there is, and lots of it. And I think it's it's a really interesting point about how, in my view, in simple terms, this industry for the last century plus has just pushed energy out, molecules, electrons, and somewhere at the end of it is a customer. If we're going to be successful managing this transition, the customer needs to be engaged. The customer needs to be part of that process. and therefore our industry needs to represent the societies in which it operates. It needs to represent the customers with whom we need to engage, and we've not done a very good job of that for the most part.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely. And we need to have all the voices in our industry to hear the voices outside. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, and maybe if we come back to you, Miya, a little bit. As a female leader, how important is it for you to role model a different style of leadership? Can you talk about that experience? And you talked about before about just the difference in behaviours within diversity. It's not just about sort of ticking lots of boxes. So how has that journey been for you?
Yes, I mean, the first thing I want to stress is I've had great manager throughout. And I think managers that male, female, alike were all different. They all had their style. So I don't think there's a male, female type of leadership. So they all have been role model at some point in time for myself. So that's very important first, to have all those role models around. Now, I would say, and maybe back to the point we're making on the 10% only CEOs in FTSE 100 companies. There may be some reason to that. That is, you think this role of CEO is something where you have male traits, if I may say, power, how you make decisions. So for me, it's been also a little bit of a questioning throughout the years of my career, because through Engie, I've been exposed into circumstances where I had to deal with very tense business situations, or I had very tough contract negotiations, for example. And so you have to find the fine line between being yourself and still appearing strong in those circumstances. So how can you be sensitive without sounding weak, caring? How can you express your natural self? That's a real question. So I feel that, okay, I need to be myself. That's my natural style, but also I feel it's a bit of a duty to embody a different kind of leadership, if I may say.
And it's interesting, isn't it? Because that's a question that doesn't go to men in this industry, the question I asked. And I've heard so many women say, if they're strong, they're seen as too strong. If they're caring, they're seen as too caring. And these are judgments that are very, very rarely applied to men. And I guess there's an element of, in a way, that most men aren't thinking, where are they on that scale? For you as a senior female leader in the energy industry, do you find yourself sort of constantly kind of figuring out where you are on the scale and whether you need to ramp up, ramp down on being tough, caring, and other dimensions?
Look, I think it's over the years probably, but at some point in time, you just learn to be yourself. And start to act just naturally how you would. And I'd say still today I have circumstances where I joined in a meeting and I felt very underestimated at first, and sometimes when the business situation gets more tensed, you have someone in front of you that is very surprised when you show your strong self, because initially, I think you're just that very sensitive lady. But the element of surprise is actually good as well sometimes.
Well, I'm glad you're using it to your advantage. So if you could give your younger self some words of advice, what would those words be?
That would be fantastic, if you could, look at yourself now and after all the years of experience and start back. I think I'd say don't try so hard, because as I believe many of us, not just female, but also male, I've often had a little inner voice that says, oh, am I enough? Am I good enough? Am I knowledgeable enough? Am I expert enough? Am I strong enough? So it's not entirely negative, because that pushed me to work incredibly hard. And in the end, I'm sure that hard work matters. But as a young person, I've had that tendency to really seek for the perfection, you know, go as far as it takes. And then when you grow in your career, you realize that in a broader role, you just can't do that. It's not humanly possible. You also start to learn that actually being in this discomfort zone where you doubt you have what it takes is how you grow. And I'm sure you would agree that most people who had a really strong career path, they had that one or two times in their career where they had to do a really bold move, and they were put in a very discomfortable situation. And at that moment, what makes you get through it is the kind of drive to succeed and the self-confidence that you will end up by being successful.
Yeah, and I think that's so true, and I think that it's equally true of men. Everything you just said, I think fewer men would admit that, but I think it's true, and certainly it resonates with my own experiences. So you just looked sort of backwards. We can now look forwards, and I mentioned it's our 10-year anniversary as Powerful Women this year. It's a very important and exciting year for us as an organisation. What do you think the energy workforce is going to look like in 10 years' time from now?
Yeah, so first, really congratulations on the past 10 years and all the great things that have been achieved. And I think we have a beautiful party this year, and I joined the show. So look, in 10 years, 2034, so we'll be nearing all the great commitments that many of the companies and governments have made in terms of the energy transition. We're going to be past a lot of commitments made in terms of gender parity. I mean,
Sure.
in Engie, we have that 50-50 target by 2030. So we should be, if you project yourself in a place where we have a young, diverse, and not just young, but a really diverse workforce, thriving and really engaged and proud of all that's been achieved already, and really looking forward to the coming years. So that's like a dream, right?
Absolutely, and look, I think 10 years is a long time. It's a short time. But I do think, I mean, it shows the power of targets. And you talked about Denise Wilson before, and the FTSE women leaders, and the huge change we've seen at the board level. And it took that drive, that commitment, and that belief. And I hear so often how hard it is. But I think over a 10-year period, you set clear targets. They can be delivered if you have the right leadership.
That's correct.
So and then we've got one more question before I think we open it up to Q&A from our audience. For you personally, over the next 10 years, Miya, what would you like to achieve?
So I don't tend to set myself really quantitative targets in every aspect of my life, and that's a broad question. I try to keep a general sense of what I want to achieve, or the direction I want my life to take, and more importantly, of the values I really want to remain true to in any circumstances. So in other words, keep my priority in the right order. And I think in 10 years' time, what I really like is to be able to look back and still feel grateful for what I've had the chance to live, and still, not ashamed of what I have left behind. And, if you put it back to work, I think in business, the business successes matters. I like to transform organization, lead the change. So I hope I'll have more chances to do that, contributing to society and the greater good. And all of this matters. I hope I will have chance to do that more. But when I look back at the end of the day, what I remember of all those years is the people I worked with. And I'm sure in 10 years' time would be the same. Really, the great teams I've been part of, the great managers, leaders I had the chance to encounter, and really the people. Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, I've got every confidence in 10 years, Miya, you will have got on to do brilliant things and achieved great things, and as you say, stuck with your values. So really looking forward to seeing where you are in 10 years' time. Maybe we'll get you back on another spotlight to to go back. So look, we want to make sure we get questions in from our audience. So with that, I'm going to hand back to Georgina, who I think is going to talk us through the questions that are coming in.
Yes, thank you, Nick. So yes, everyone, we've got about 25 minutes for questions, so please do put your questions in the Q&A for Miya. And the first question we've got is there a book that you would recommend for everyone to read that can help us build a better workplace?
I mean, a better workplace. So first thing I say is, you know, when you have your priorities in the right order, and I have a family and a demanding job, then yeah, you make some concession on some of the things. And I probably seen less Netflix series than most of people in this call. And about reading, I also try to keep a little space for that, but probably not as much as I'd like. One book I've reread recently, and it struck me actually, was the George Orwell 1984, and I think it's kind of mind-blowing to see some of the traits and what the society is coming. So I'm not sure it's an indication of what a better work environment is, but it's certainly a point that is in the back of my mind in terms of worry and where our society is heading.
And Georgina, if I can jump in here, I just do a plug for Nuala Walsh, who joined us at a recent Powerful Women ELC meeting, and her book Tune In has, I think it came out about a month ago, so I haven't finished it. I'm still reading it, but I think she raises some really interesting insights about the sort of behavioural aspects of inclusion and just so many things that we haven't thought of, we take for granted, and actually, you know, that people just kind of walk past it without noticing it. So there's some great anecdotes and examples in that book.
Put it on my list.
So our next question is, how have you built your confidence and business acumen over the years?
It's I think again, you need in a career some support. I mean, you would find around most successful leaders, male, female, you have a whole lot of allies and supporting people, starting, you know, with your family, of course. They are so important, and the great leaders that you have the chance to work with, that give you that confidence that what you're doing is okay and is good, and they are here to support. So I think that contributes, and I think then it's going one step after the next. I've never had like a career plan. I'm going to do that, and in 10 years I'll be there and that. I've just walked one step after the next, and when there was the occasion to take a bold step, I just jumped into the pool, and honestly, it didn't feel comfortable at all at first. And very frankly, there have been times where I just wanted to run back, you know, roll it back, and I've made a mistake. But then you stick around, you say, and in that one example, for instance, I've been moving all my family in Romania, and then I started a job, and then, you know, I mean, I couldn't speak the language to start with. It was a field of activity I hadn't been involved into at all in the past. As I say, I started marketing and tourism, so it was really far from my self-competence. And when you get into those tough situations, I sticked around because I said, I can't have my family going back. You know, they are happy here now. We just moved. I can't destroy it. So I need to stick around. And then sometimes you hit the bottom of the pool, and then it's either you drown or you give that kick and you go up. And when you do that once, twice, then you know you are able to. And that brings confidence. That's where I was mentioning, you know, sometimes you need to be put outside of your comfort zone to build your confidence.
You referenced role models in the conversation that you had with Nick, and the question that's come through is, who are your role models as a female leader in a male-dominated sector like energy?
Okay, it will sound very cheesy, but I really, really love our CEO, Catherine McGregor. She's, I mean, she's so approachable, extremely, extremely smart, very business oriented, and a great human being all through. So yeah, she's an important role model to me.
Next question is, what would you suggest to an individual and company how to transform and drive women from middle supervisory management role to leadership role?
Yes, it's not an easy question, but I think, you know, and I tend to do that also. I try not to, but you are looking when you are a manager sometimes at kind of security. Donc you have the next role, you open it up, you look at CVs, and if you don't have the candidate that's done exactly the same thing before, you say, you know, doesn't tick all the boxes. That's wrong, I think, because someone that comes in the job having it done prior won't have any fresh eyes on things, would not have the drive and motivation. So I think there are a lot of talents in the middle management, but also more junior at all level, and is to expose those people that are willing. So everyone, you know, has different aspirations. So not everyone needs to grow into being a CEO. That's not the sense of happiness in life for everyone at all. But for those people who would like to do that, is to let them try and then accompany them in terms of comforting them. They can, giving them the right level of training where there are technical skills to acquire.
And then another question has come through. There's been a lot of discussion about larger companies here today. What do you think smaller organizations can do?
Yes, it's a very good question. And I think smaller organization can probably do more. I mean, more than large organizations sometimes, because in the end, in smaller organization, each individual matters more in terms of just proportionally, right? And sometimes the management chain is shorter, so it's easier to have a conversation with the top management that drives smaller organization or the leader. But it's probably a question also for you, Georgina and Nick, is how we make sure that we enroll every type of organization in our initiatives, all sizes.
I think if I come in, I think the big thing that any company can do is gather data, because I think you can't measure the information you don't gather. And I think by having that data, whatever you can gather from your company, that then helps you to kind of focus what your D&I initiatives are going to be, and what are going to be the initiatives and policies that you can put in place that are really going to benefit your employees and create this inclusive company culture and ensure you retain talent. So my big shout out is always about gathering data.
And I would just build on that, Georgina. I think the data tells you where you are. I think there's a huge amount of sharing that the big companies can do with smaller companies. And by the way, there's some great smaller companies out there doing really good stuff. But on balance, and I recently have been involved in some judging of some awards. It was quite interesting seeing the different characteristics between very big companies and much smaller companies in terms of the sophistication around this. I also think we're in a bit of a culture where the level of scrutiny is so high that it almost feels sometimes that if you're not delivering at 10 out of 10, you're going to be exposed and maybe publicly embarrassed. And without taking the pressure off and the determination to get to where we need to, I think we need to kind of have some forgiveness and some, a more nurturing approach, so companies don't feel they have to go from 0 to 10 overnight. There's got to be a journey to get you there.
Exactly. You need to walk that path. You can't jump from 0 to 100. Yes.
Exactly.
So next question, what strategies can we employ to foster open dialogue and understanding between majority and minority groups within companies?
I think there's a number of things that can be done. you can have I'm sure Georgina and Nick, you have a lot of great examples across industries, but you can have groups of minority that talk and install a dialogue with the majority. I've seen also examples in companies where you have really that safe space also for men to express themselves about what they feel when we are saying, you know, we have a gender parity target. And it's important to hear that. And it's a place where, you know, it's not confrontational. They can also speak with one another. And then, you know, how you put that dialogue in place. So it's really about giving space to every voices.
And I think there's something, you know, I'm thinking of, you know, what has happened in the energy sector before, and I think there's a confluence of transition and DEI playing out at the same time. So if you think about what happened to the coal industry in the UK through the sort of 70s, 80s, 90s, as that industry effectively closed down, it left whole communities, you know, effectively stranded from economic development. And so parts of, you know, the industry are feeling under threat. If you work in offshore oil and gas, you know, not only is there this transitional threat, but if you are a white 50-something male who's only worked in oil and gas, it feels pretty scary. And you know, I think the more we bring those people into this debate and, you know, explain their role and how they can help the transition, both in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the transition, the far more engagement we're going to have and the far more support we're going to have for this agenda.
Absolutely, and you're right. It's how we organize and reach out. I mean, it's probably a theme we can put on the debate of the next Powerful Women or ELC discussion. It's really important we act concretely to hear those voices.
And I think if I can add to that as well, I think it also brings us back to the power of mentoring, whether that's peer-to-peer mentoring or reverse mentoring, because there's that opportunity that, you know, if you do engage with people who are sort of outside of the normal zone that you interact with, you get to learn a new perspective, new ideas, understand people's lived experiences. So I think there's the power of mentoring as well that can be brought into opening that dialogue. The next question is, you mentioned your family. Can you share a secret for managing work-life balance within a family environment?
I call it managing the imbalance. You never get it perfect. So sometimes, you know, you need to dedicate too much time to work and you feel that the balance is not right. And then you try to correct it, and then you feel you're not giving enough to work, and then you correct it. So it's a permanent imbalance. And honestly, I think for most people, for me, for sure, that's the greatest challenge. You can name them all, but the greatest challenge is time. It's time. And somewhere deep inside, and I believe that's one of the main reasons why some women wouldn't progress a career despite the fact that they have an aspiration to do so, is the guilt. Feeling guilty about not spending enough time with your family. I'm saying it for women, but it's probably and ever more true for men as well. And guilt is not good, but it's better than regret afterwards. So the guilt is here also to help you realize that you know you have to keep that imbalance going and restore it on one way or the other. So, I mean, there are things that I've always done. I've never compromised on having support at home. So, you know, even beginning of my career or whatever, I would always prioritize over any other spending to have help at home, for instance, because I want the time with my kids to matter. And if I'm stressed out with household tasks, not that I have none, of course, we all end up having, but having as much as I could, some help. And then that's also obviously having that kind of support network, being your partner or sometimes your parents or neighbors, and try organize that. And then you keep on juggling. But at the end of the day, you know, it's important not to put that kind of mental barrier that prevents you from doing the next step. You need to take the next step. And if you feel that the imbalance is too wrong for too long, then you roll it back. I think if many women would have tried that, they would find out that there's another way, and they can find that space. And also it's for women to push organization managers to change a little bit sometimes, if needed, the way they approach things, because you can generally have, and especially now with all the ways you have to work from remotely, you can have more space and freedom to organize your time around the priorities. So you don't not necessarily need to be in the office from 8:30 to 6:30 or whatever time you work. You can maybe have an interruption, restart. You have more flexibility to organize your day-to-day job. But yeah, it's a constant juggle, that's for sure.
And Miya, if I can bring in a male perspective on this, I think the really interesting thing is most men I speak to who have got young kids or who plan to have kids want the same things as women. And I think
exactly.
When you speak to senior males who may have retired from the industry, the regret they so often mention is not spending more time with the kids and having that guilt that you described. There's a great quote. There's nobody on their deathbed who says they wish they worked more hours in their life. But and I think something I'm passionate about is how we get sort of the same policies, the same flexibility, both males and females. We need to have this sense that parenting, caring is a shared responsibility across gender.
No, exactly, but that's also one of course, the benefit, because male can see gender parity as a threat. Obviously, Nick, you're an ally, so that's great. But what it also offers is a different balance at the level of the whole society. And also, I think, so as you're saying, describing very well, some male will regret not having spent the time or had the luxury to spend the time with their kids, and they had to be also the provider for the family. That's very true. And some male feel very comfortable in that role, but some others would have liked things to be different.
Yeah, and so the more employers can just offer great parental flexibility for all, the better.
So the next question is, do you have any advice on how to encourage more men, particularly in leadership, to get involved in conversations on gender diversity to build allyship?
Again, I think it's to give the feeling that every voice is welcome, because again, and very important that no one feels that they have to comply with the line of thoughts, and of course it can be felt that way sometimes. I'm sure we have to recognize that it's difficult if a man has doubt to express himself. So we need to find a way to install that dialogue, and I'm sure that through that we can have a meaningful conversation, and more male will feel the sense of what we're doing.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more on that. We definitely need everybody involved in this conversation to, make the change that we need. Our final question for this afternoon is, as we attract Gen X and Y to our industry, our customers and employees are aging. How might we capitalise on this?
I'm not sure the link between the two, but what I think is we have to be careful when we say diversity, and it's something that is quite dear to my heart. Sometimes in companies or in society, you end up feeling that if you're not, if you don't have a CEO that is, below 40 or 50, depending which sector you're working on, and you're not the next young talent, you're not worth anything. And that's true. We focus a lot on new generation, but there's also a space for everyone. And as you're saying, our customers have a different profiles. They come from all ages, and we need our industry to reflect that. So there's also a space for all kind of people, and young and older, and that's very different point of view on life. We were discussing, you know, what you know after 20 years of career versus what you know when you start, and what you know after 40 years of career and 50. So I think it's important. So I'm not sure I'm answering really the question. You may want to rephrase it, but that was a topic dear to my heart.
I think that's all of our questions. I'm going to pass over to Nick to just close out on the webinar, but thank you for your answers.
Thank you, Georgina, and thank you to everybody that submitted those questions, really helpful and insightful questions. It's been a really interesting conversation for me, Miya, and I'm sure our audience. I've really enjoyed hearing your sort of personal perspectives on the importance of DEI and this crucial linkage to the energy transition across so many dimensions that we've discussed today. Your openness on the experiences of balancing the imbalance of family and work, I think, is really interesting, and it needs role models like you to sort of be as candid as you have been in terms of some of the sort of the tricks, but also the reality of getting these things right. And I loved about, you know, how you talked about sort of don't be too hard on yourself when you sort of reflected on your younger self, and I think that applies to many men as much as it does to women. And I love the sort of you talked about, you know, the sort of importance of happiness and balance in all of this. So before I draw it to a close, I do have to ask the final killer question when it comes to cuisine. So we're on diversity of food now. So French, Italian, Japanese, what's it going to be?
I'm not going to make just friends if I answer this one, will I? No, I mean, in short, I love them all, that's true. But I think the people should try the real Japanese cuisine. That's maybe less obvious. It's fantastic. So I encourage everyone to
Very good. I thought you were going to go for some fusion answer there, which would have covered all three, but great answer. So look, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. It's been great to have you with us. As a reminder, we have recorded this, so please spread the word and let others watch what we've talked about today. Our next session will take place on the 12th of September with Ruth Herbert, CEO of the Carbon Capture and Storage Association. So it just leaves me to thank Miya. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. It's been a real pleasure to have you on. Thank you, Miya.
Thank you all. Thank you for having me.